Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. Jessica was always the star. She had the kind of presence that commanded attention. A sharp smile, a confident stride, a voice that made people lean in when she spoke. In the beginning, I admired it. I thought we were a team. I thought she was proud to have me by her side. But over time, I realized she didn't see me as an equal. I was an accessory, a prop she could pull out when needed, something stable and predictable while she chased her ambitions. It started with small things, correcting me in front of her colleagues, rolling her eyes when I didn't get a reference from her work conversations. Then it became jokes at my expense. I told myself I was overthinking it, that she was just being Jessica, but then came the night of her parents' anniversary dinner. The restaurant was upscale, candlelit. Her family sat around the table, glasses of wine in hand, listening as Jessica regaled them with a story from work. And of course, I had to be the one to step in and fix it, she said, shaking her head. I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm carrying that entire company on my back. Her father chuckled. Well, you've always been the smart one. It's no surprise. Her mother smiled. It must be exhausting keeping everything together. Jessica let out a theatrical sigh, then leaned back, resting her hand on mine. Tell me about it. I mean, someone has to be the responsible one in this marriage, right? The table laughed. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around my glass. Her sister, Emily, shifted uncomfortably. She had always been the only one in Jessica's family who seemed to see what was happening. Jessica grinned, oblivious. I swear, Ryan would forget to pay the bills if I didn't remind him. More laughter. I exhaled slowly, staring at my plate. I could feel their eyes on me, expecting me to play along, to take the joke like I always did. But something inside me snapped. I set my fork down. Actually, I said, keeping my voice calm, I handle all of our bills, and our investments, and our savings. I also set up the retirement plans that someone didn't think were important. The laughter died. Jessica's smile faltered. Her father cleared his throat. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Jessica let out a small laugh, but it was forced. All right. No need to get so serious. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I had let her paint this version of me. Passive, forgettable, lucky to have her. But I wasn't that man anymore. And soon, she was going to find out just how wrong she had been. I barely spoke to Jessica on the drive home. She didn't seem to notice. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, texting someone, probably her work friends, keeping up the illusion that she was the one in control of everything, the one holding the world together while I tagged along in the background. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. The thing that bothered me the most about that night wasn't the joke itself. It was the way she had expected me to take it. Like I wasn't supposed to care. Like my feelings weren't even worth considering. When we pulled into the driveway, Jessica let out a small sigh, finally setting her phone down. You've been quiet. I put the car in park. Yeah. She unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't get out. You're not actually mad, are you? Ich glänzte her. Why would I be? She gave a small laugh, shaking her head. Ryan, come on. It was a joke. My family gets it. You're being sensitive. There it was. That familiar dismissal. The same tone she always used when I tried to express anything remotely uncomfortable. I exhaled through my nose. Yeah, maybe I am. She tilted her head. Are you seriously mad about one little comment? I turned to face her fully. It's never just one, Jess. It's every time. Every dinner, every event, every time we're around other people. You make me the punchline. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. I let out a short laugh. You don't even realize it, do you? She frowned. That's not fair. I opened the car door before she could finish, stepping out and walking toward the house. I wasn't in the mood for another round of Ryan. You're overreacting. Inside, I went straight to the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water. My pulse was still elevated, my thoughts spinning. Jessica walked in a few moments later, setting her purse on the counter. Look, if this is about tonight, it's not just about tonight. I turned to her. It's about the way you see me, the way you talk about me. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Ryan, you're blowing this out of proportion. I stared at her for a long moment. Am I? Her silence was all the answer I needed. The next few days were tense. Jessica acted like nothing had happened, going about her usual routine, early meetings, late nights, answering work calls during dinner. I didn't push the conversation again. There was no point. Then Friday night came. We were at a dinner party with her friends, the kind of crowd where I was just Jessica's husband, not someone who mattered on my own. I played my usual role, sitting back, letting her bask in the attention, until one of her friends, a woman named Claire, turned to me with a smile. "So, Ryan, how do you keep up with someone like Jessica?" Jessica smirked. "Oh, he doesn't. He just tries his best." Laughter. I forced a smile, setting my drink down. "Actually, Claire, I don't try to keep up. I choose not to compete." Jessica's smile flickered. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice light. "Because if I did, I don't think she'd like the results." Silence. Jessica let out a breathy laugh, but it was tight, forced. "Okay, that's enough wine for you." I held her gaze. "Why?" "Afraid I might actually say something interesting." A few of her friends exchanged glances. Claire shifted in her seat. Jessica's expression hardened. "Ryan, enough." I leaned back, shrugging. "Just playing along, babe." Jessica's jaw clenched. For the first time, she was the one feeling small. And for the first time, I didn't feel bad about it. Jessica didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. She smiled for her friends, laughed at the right moments, and played the perfect hostess, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around her wine glass. I saw the way she avoided looking directly at me, the way her polished demeanor cracked just enough for me to know I had gotten to her. Good. For years, I had let her shape the narrative of our marriage. She was the brilliant, high-achieving executive, and I was the quiet, supportive husband who stayed in the background. But I wasn't playing that part anymore. When we got home, Jessica set her clutch down with more force than necessary. I closed the door behind us, bracing myself. "You embarrassed me," she said, turning to face me. I raised an eyebrow. "How?" She scoffed. "You know how? That little comment at dinner? Making it sound like you think you're better than me?" I cut in. Her jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant." "No." I tilted my head. "Then tell me what you did mean, Jess." She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "I meant that you don't understand my world. You don't get the pressure I'm under." I laughed under my breath. "Right. Because being a cybersecurity analyst requires no intelligence at all." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" She hesitated, crossing her arms. "I just mean, I've outgrown this. Us." I stared at her, the weight of those words settling in. "Wow." Jessica exhaled, pressing her fingers to her temples. "Ryan, I didn't mean..." "Yeah," I said quietly. "You did." She swallowed hard but didn't deny it. I walked past her, heading toward the bedroom. "I'm done talking about this tonight." The next morning, Jessica was back to her usual self, coffee in hand, phone buzzing with emails, acting like the conversation had never happened. She glanced at me over her cup. "I have a work trip next week. Exclusive resort in Hawaii. It's for the company retreat." I took a sip of my own coffee. "Hawaii, huh?" She nodded, flipping through her emails. "Yeah, it'll be a good chance to reset." Something about the way she said it made my stomach turn. I watched her for a moment, my mind piecing things together. Her dismissiveness, her attitude, the way she had so casually said she had outgrown me. Then, she smirked slightly, swirling the coffee in her cup. "I've decided I want to have an affair." The words landed like a punch. I blinked. "Excuse me." She set her cup down, her expression completely unbothered. "I deserve to experience something exciting. I just wanted to be honest with you about it." I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. She had said it so casually, like it was a minor inconvenience, something I should simply accept. Jessica tilted her head. "You're not going to freak out." I let out a breath, leaning back in my chair. No, her eyebrows lifted slightly. "No." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Thanks for letting me know." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. She had expected me to yell, to cry, to beg. She had no idea she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Jessica thought she had control. She thought she could look me in the eye and tell me she deserved to cheat, that she was simply being honest, and that I'd just accept it. She had no idea what was coming. The moment she walked out the door for work that morning, I grabbed my laptop and got to work. If she wanted to treat our marriage like an afterthought, like something she had outgrown, then I was going to make sure she learned what it felt like to be left behind. The first thing I did was pull up her travel itinerary. Jessica was meticulous about her trips. She forwarded every confirmation email to our shared inbox without thinking twice, never considering that I might actually look at them. Her flight was booked for Friday morning. Nonstop to Maui. 5 nights at an exclusive resort. All expenses covered by her company. But Jessica had gotten cocky. Attached to the confirmation was a second booking. A separate suite. This one paid for with her personal credit card. That was all the proof I needed. She hadn't just considered cheating. She had planned for it. I exhaled slowly, my pulse steady. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That's what she expected. She wanted a reaction, wanted me to break down, to prove to her that I was still the man who would always be waiting for her. But I wasn't that man anymore. I called the resort first. After confirming Jessica's reservation details, I had them cancel her second booking entirely. Then, I modified her company reservation, upgrading it to the honeymoon suite under my name. Then, I made another call. Emily picked up on the second ring. Ryan. I hadn't spoken to Jessica's younger sister in months. Not since Jessica had gone on one of her rants about how Emily was wasting her potential after her divorce. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me now. I leaned back in my chair. How do you feel about a free trip to Hawaii? There was a pause. Are you serious? Completely. She hesitated. Jessica's trip? I smirked. Not anymore. Emily let out a breath. I knew she was selfish, but this? Wow. So, I said, you in. There was another pause. Then a quiet chuckle. Ryan, I wouldn't miss this for the world. That night, I watched Jessica pack. She was humming to herself, moving around the room with the kind of confidence that made my skin crawl. I leaned against the doorway. Excited? She barely glanced up. Yeah, I really need this trip. I smiled. I bet you do. She zipped up her suitcase, giving me a fleeting look. You're being very mature about this. I laughed under my breath. Yeah, I am. Jessica thought she had me figured out. She had no idea. Jessica arrived at the resort Friday afternoon, ready for her exciting experience. She didn't even make it to check in. Excuse me? She snapped, leaning over the front desk. What do you mean my reservation has been canceled? The receptionist, a polite woman with a professional smile, typed something into the system. I'm sorry, ma'am, but there is no active booking under your name. Jessica inhaled sharply. That's impossible. The receptionist hesitated. There's a honeymoon suite reserved under Ryan Caldwell. Jessica froze. What? The receptionist nodded. Yes, he checked in earlier today. Jessica's head snapped up just as I walked through the entrance. Emily beside me, her sunglasses perched on her head, looking effortlessly relaxed. I smiled at Jessica, sliding my arm around Emily's waist. Oh, hey, Jess. Didn't expect to see you here. Jessica's face turned red. You did this? I tilted my head. Did what? Her hands curled into fists. You cancel my reservation? I smirked. Technically, I upgraded it. I gestured to Emily, since she deserved the experience more. Jessica let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a scream and a growl. Emily sighed, adjusting her sunglasses. Jess, I always knew you were a terrible sister. But this? Trying to cheat on your husband and acting like you deserved it? Yikes. Jessica's hands trembled. You're disgusting. I exhaled slowly, then stepped closer, my voice calm. No, Jessica. I just finally learned to stop being stupid. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The receptionist cleared her throat. Would you like me to book you another room, ma'am? Jessica turned back to her, seething. Yes. The woman typed into the system, then gave her an apologetic smile. I'm afraid we're fully booked for the weekend. I smiled. That's tough. Jessica let out a shaky breath, her entire body shaking with rage. Emily glanced at me. Come on, Ryan. We have a couple's massage to get to. Jessica's eyes went wide. You're disgusting. I turned to her one last time, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You wanted an experience, Jess? I smiled coldly. So did I. Then, without another word, I took Emily's hand and walked toward the elevator, leaving Jessica standing there, humiliated, with nowhere to go. Jessica had spent years making me feel replaceable. Now, She was the one left behind, and I had never felt more free. Jessica was still standing at the front desk when the elevator door slid shut. I caught one last glimpse of her face, red with rage, lips slightly parted like she wanted to scream but didn't quite know how. I expected her to come storming after me, to demand an explanation, to claw back whatever dignity she had left. But she didn't. That's how I knew I had truly broken her. Jessica had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough. Now, for the first time, she was the one standing there, helpless. The elevator ride was silent for a few seconds. Then Emily let out a low whistle. She shook her head, smirking. Damn, Ryan. I exhaled, finally allowing myself to relax. Yeah. Emily nudged my shoulder playfully. Couples massage, huh? I chuckled. Seemed like the right thing to say. She laughed, shaking her head. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for someone to knock Jessica down a peg. I did, actually. Jessica had always resented Emily, her natural charm, the way people were drawn to her. Emily didn't need power plays, didn't need to belittle people to feel good about herself. That had always driven Jessica crazy. Now here we were, in her place. The door opened to the honeymoon suite, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Light. No tensión. No waiting for the next backhanded comment or sarcastic remark. Just peace. Emily kicked off her sandals, grabbing a drink from the minibar. So what now? I sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through my hair. Now, I let her realize she lost. Jessica, meanwhile, was spiraling. I didn't hear from her for the rest of the night. No texts, no calls. But I knew her too well. She wasn't letting this go. She was planning. And I was right. The next morning, as Emily and I were having breakfast on the balcony, my phone buzzed. Jessica. I'll let it ring. Emily raised an eyebrow. Not going to answer? I smirked. Nope. A few seconds later, a text came through. Jessica, we need to talk. I ignored it. Then another. Jessica, this isn't funny, Ryan. Grow up. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Emily glanced over. Let me guess. She's flipping out. Of course she is. I leaned back in my chair. She thought she was in control. A few minutes later, another text. Jessica, you can't just do this to me. I turned my phone over and picked up my coffee. She's unraveling. Emily smirked. Good. By the afternoon, Jessica had given up on texts and resorted to a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the cracks underneath. Ryan, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny. You're being ridiculous. I told you the truth because I respected you enough to be honest. And this is how you react. A shaky breath. Call me back. Now. I didn't. Instead, I sent a single text. Me. Enjoy your experience. Then I blocked her number. For the first time in years, Jessica had no power over me. And it felt incredible. Jessica showed up at my apartment 2 days after I got back from Hawaii. I had barely finished unpacking when I heard the sharp, angry knock on my door. I knew it was her before I even looked through the peephole. I considered ignoring it, letting her stew in the silence like I had on the island, but something in me wanted to see the look on her face. When I opened the door, Jessica shoved past me without waiting for an invitation. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, her usual controlled expression nowhere to be seen. She was furious. You, she seethed, spinning to face me. What the hell was that? I shut the door behind her, leaning against it. Be more specific. Her nostrils flared. You humiliated me. I crossed my arms. Oh, you mean like when you sat across from me at dinner and announced that you deserved to cheat? Or when you booked a second hotel room, fully intending to do it? Her mouth opened, but I cut her off before she could spit out another excuse. Save it, Jess. I saw the second reservation. I know what you were planning. Her face paled for half a second before she recovered, her arms folding tightly across her chest. That doesn't change the fact that you blindsided me. I let out a humorless laugh. You're mad that I blindsided you? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You were about to throw away our marriage for some fling, and you're angry because I beat you to it? She sucked in a sharp breath, her jaw tightening. That's not. You don't get to rewrite this, I said coldly. You don't get to stand here and play the victim. Her fingers curled into fists. I was honest with you. I exhaled sharply. No, Jessica. You were cruel. I shook my head. You wanted me to accept it. You thought I'd just sit here and let you walk all over me because that's what I've always done, right? I let out a short laugh. Well, guess what? I changed. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Panic? Regret? It didn't matter. You're unbelievable, she spat. You took my trip, Ryan. And with Emily? She let out a bitter laugh. God, of all people, my sister. I shrugged. Seemed fitting. Her face twisted in disgust. You're disgusting. I smirked. Maybe, but at least I didn't cheat on my spouse. Jessica's hands were shaking now. Not with sadness. With rage. You enjoyed it, didn't you? She snapped. Watching me suffer. I tilted my head. Not as much as you enjoyed making me feel small for years. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, she swallowed hard and straightened her shoulders, trying to regain whatever dignity she had left. So what now? She asked, voice clipped. I let out a slow breath. Now I move on. Her throat bobbed. Just like that? Just like that. She forced out a small laugh. You think you're winning here? You think you're better than me now? I shook my head. No, Jess. I just finally see you. Her face flickered with something close to pain before she turned away, heading toward the door. She hesitated for half a second, like she was waiting for me to stop her, to say something that would give her back even an ounce of control. I didn't. She walked out without another word. I shut the door behind her and locked it. For the first time in years, I was finally free. The divorce process moved faster than I expected, mostly because I had made it clear I wanted nothing from Jessica. No drawn-out battles, no fights over assets, just a clean break. Still, I knew she wasn't going to let it go that easily. Jessica thrived on control. She had spent our entire marriage making sure she held the power, making sure I knew that without her, I was just ordinary. But now, she was scrambling. Her first move was predictable denial. I was at work when I got the first email from her. Jessica, we need to talk. I think you're acting impulsively, and you'll regret it if you go through with this. Let's meet. I deleted it without replying. A day later, another email. Jessica, I don't understand why you're shutting me out. At least give me the respect of a conversation. Respect? The word almost made me laugh. I ignored that one, too. Then came the call from my lawyer. She's hired an attorney, Jacob said, sounding amused. She wants to negotiate. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Negotiate what? I'm not asking for anything. That's the problem, Jacob said. She doesn't like that you're walking away so easily. She wants to feel like she's winning. I smirked. Then let's make sure she knows she lost. The first legal meeting was set for Friday. I walked into the conference room feeling lighter than I had in years. Jessica was already there, sitting stiffly across the table, her nails tapping impatiently against the polished wood. She looked polished, put together, the same way she always did when she was trying to control a situation. But her eyes flickered with something else when she saw me. She was nervous. Her lawyer, a man in a too-tight suit, cleared his throat. Jessica is open to discussing a fair division of assets. Jacob leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Ethan already made his terms clear. He doesn't want anything from her. Jessica's lips parted slightly, like she hadn't expected that to be repeated in front of her lawyer. The man frowned, flipping through his notes. No financial requests? No property claims? Jacob shook his head. Nothing. He just wants to finalize this as soon as possible. Jessica's fingers curled against the table. That's not fair. I raised an eyebrow. Not fair? You're keeping everything. How is that unfair? She turned to me, her expression tight. Because you're making me look like the bad guy. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Jess, you're the bad guy. Silence. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Jessica, is there something specific you'd like to request? Jessica swallowed hard, her jaw tightening. She exhaled sharply. This isn't how it was supposed to go. I tilted my head. How was it supposed to go, Jess? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it the moment she realized she had lost. She had spent years convincing herself she was too good for me, that I would never leave, that I needed her more than she needed me. But now, I was the one walking away without a second thought. Her voice was quieter when she finally spoke. You don't even care, do you? I met her gaze. Not anymore. She swallowed, looking down at the table. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. Jacob slid the papers across the table. So, are we signing today? Jessica hesitated, just for a second. Then, she grabbed the pen and signed. And just like that, it was over. When I walked out of that office, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I just felt free. That night, Megan came over with whiskey and takeout, dropping onto the couch beside me. So, she said, raising an eyebrow. Is it official? I held up the signed papers. Done and dusted. She grinned, clinking her glass against mine. To new beginnings. I smirked. To never being that stupid again. Jessica had spent years making sure I felt small. But now, she was the one left behind. And I was finally living. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds. No alarm, no stress, no Jessica's passive-aggressive sighs as she rushed to get ready for work. Just quiet. I made coffee, sat on the small balcony, and for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I needed to do for someone else. No obligations. No walking on eggshells. Just me. Jessica had always made it seem like I needed her, like I was the lucky one in our marriage. But now that she was gone, I felt lighter, freer. Turns out, the only thing I had needed was to get away from her. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my life on my terms. Work became less of an escape and more of something I actually enjoyed again. I started going to the gym regularly, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because it felt good to take care of myself. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted from over the years because Jessica had always made it seem like our social life revolved around her. And then there was Megan. She had been checking in since the divorce papers were filed, making sure I wasn't drowning in self-pity. But the truth was I wasn't. If anything, I was thriving. One night, she invited me out for drinks. I hesitated at first, not sure if I was ready to re-enter that world. But then I realized, why not? The bar was packed, music humming through the walls, the kind of place Jessica would have turned her nose up at for being too lowbrow. Megan slid a beer across the table toward me, smirking. So, has the freedom fully sunk in yet? I took a sip, leaning back. I think it hit me the first morning I woke up and didn't have to listen to Jessica criticizing the way I brewed coffee. Megan laughed. That sounds tragically accurate. I smirked. What about you? I feel like we've spent all this time talking about my escape. How's post-divorce life treating you? She shrugged. Honestly, best thing that ever happened to me. She took a sip of her drink. But I won't lie. It took me way longer than you to shake off the guilt. I raised an eyebrow. Guilt? Megan rolled her eyes. You know, that stupid little voice that tells you maybe you were the problem. Maybe you didn't try hard enough. I exhaled. Yeah, I remember that voice. She studied me for a second. And? Is it still there? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Then I shook my head. No, it's gone. Megan grinned. Good. Because that marriage? It was never your fault. I nodded, taking another sip of my beer. Jessica, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. I hadn't spoken to her since she stormed out of my office, but I still heard things, little whispers from mutual acquaintances, people who had always admired her, but now saw through the act. She had lost control of the narrative. Her career was still intact. Jessica was too skilled at marketing herself to let it crumble overnight. But she wasn't the same flawless powerhouse she used to be. People knew about the trip, about her arrogance, about how she had thrown away a marriage because she thought she was too good for it. She tried dating again, but word got around. Turns out, men didn't exactly line up to date a woman who had once announced her intent to cheat like it was a business decision. Jessica had spent years making sure I was the one who felt small. Now, she was the one shrinking, and I was finally standing tall. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.